the lease, which was owned by the merchant that was on this premises. And it was owned by a trust company or managed by a trust company. And I negotiated the lease to, he asked for $1,500 to $1,000. What I was requiring was the lease and some very crude shelves that were in the store proper. And then I agreed that I would pay $500 down, and I went to my father and I said, I need $500. And my father didn't have $500. But we had a relative that came over from Europe after the war, and he was a smart guy and a very entrepreneurial guy, and he had bought a small business in that laundered clothing for people in apartments buildings. You put in a quarter, you got, washed your things. And he became quite capable at it, learned how to fix the machines himself and so on. So my father went to him and asked him for $500, and he gave him $500 in quarters. So I took the $500 in quarters and I gave it to the merchant, and I said, I'll pay you the rest in 60 days. And with that, I managed to transfer the lease. Now, you could see I had very little overhead and I was living at home. So now the question was, where am I going to get the money for the inventory? Well, I thought that I'd met enough of the vendors of the store that I'd worked for part-time to perhaps be credible enough to get some credit. But I couldn't get any credit other than one neckwear manufacturer gave me $250 in neckwear. But I had learned quite a bit about how you fit people and measure them and so on, working for this store. And I got a manufacturer to give me lengths of cloth, which I put on the shelves. And essentially what you saw looking in was the fabric. And then the empty shelves, my part-time employer came down with his big Buick and gave me some plastic shelves, plastic trays rather, and some paper boxes, and I filled the shelves with that and gave the illusion of having some inventory. And with that, I opened for business. And I just had this absolute determination to be successful. And so for me, talking to everybody was a possibility that they would carry the word that here was an ambitious guy that was capable, a young man struggling, and they would refer me to customers. And that's exactly what happened. I walked up the street, talked to the merchants on the street, introduced myself, told them what I was about, my capabilities. I exaggerated a bit, The express driver who dropped parcels off, working for one of the railway companies, I befriended him, and he would come in and have a cup of coffee and goof off, from his a bit. And he wound up having a brother-in-law that was in business and liked clothes, and so he referred him to me. But with every customer that I got, I kept a card of his measurements and everything I knew about him, his taste, the work he did, his peer group, his interests, family, activities. Otherwise, I just kept a complete record for the customer and a swatch of the cloth, etc. This turned out to be very important because men love this idea that somebody has everything they know about them and will prescribe to their particular needs. And that's how this bonding took place between myself and my customers. But in addition to that, I asked everyone that I satisfied with their clothing, and I hope that was everybody, if they'd be good enough to give me the names of their peer group or friends who I could contact as possible customers. Some agreed to give me names. Some said that I couldn't use their name, but they gave me names. And I wrote the screwiest letters you ever saw to these people and told them the great things that were happening down here on Parliament Street. And I'd follow it up with a phone call introducing myself. And the result was that I had about a 10% rate of success with that. And that's how my clientele started to develop. And by 1961, 7 years on Parliament Street, I was really the tailor to the publishing business and the advertising business. I'd networked my way through those two industries to where our business really was the place that on a Friday afternoon when these people would goof off and have a 2-martini lunch and idle the day away, they would come to our store, meet their peers in the industry and tell lies,
I'm not sure Ed Rogers. You were early social media then. You knew how to
That's right.
Very early on, last time we spoke, you talked about these two marketing executives that came to your store and offered you a deal. Could you tell us about that story?
Yes. I guess when I started in business in 1954, I had very little exposure to the universe and retailing elsewhere. But around 1957 or 58, with the profit that I had grown our inventory into a full-line menswear store, I heard from our vendors about outstanding retailers in other parts of North America. And so I decided that, I could learn from these merchants who were well established. And I wrote them letters and went to visit them, a store in LA and San Francisco, New York, Chicago. I went and presented myself to these people, told them of my challenges, told them of the issues that I have in my business. And they cooperated and exchanged views with me, and I learned so much from them. And I also learned a lot about the type of stores that were around. So by 1961, I felt I knew that I wanted to build a bigger store in a prominent location and I had just the feeling that I wanted to have in the store, design-wise, in my mind's eye. And I went looking for a location, and I found a store. It wasn't actually a store, it was a space that was vacated on Richmond Street. It today faces the driveway of the Four Seasons, or the Sheraton Center Hotel. And I managed to talk to the landlord, who wasn't at all interested in having a retailer on his property. But they agreed to leasing me the space eventually, and I built my store in that premises, and I had an idea of exactly what kind of store I wanted to build. I wanted a store that had a real strong men's club feeling, like I had seen some of the stores in the United States. And I built that kind of store, and fortunately, before I tell you about the two men you're talking about, in 1957, passing our door on Parliament Street was a young man with a Marlboro jacket, Toronto Marlboros, and he was looking in the windows and liked the goods, and I walked out and chatted with him and brought him in, and we became friends, and his name was Bob Bond. And he brought Carl Brewer, who was a partner with him on the Leaf Defense, into our store as well. And through them, when they finally made the team and they won the Stanley Cup, I got the blazer order for the Toronto Maple Leaf hockey team and the Silver Seven, which was the management group, etc. That was a big boost to my business as well. But going back to Parliament Street, Richmond Street, where I built this new idea of a store I had, I was very fortunate. We opened the store, I remember, and I had Red Kelly and Bob Bond on the floor for 2 days. They didn't charge me a nickel for it, just out of friendship. And they were a great draw, with men coming in constantly and talking to them. And I would pick them off and take them up, show them the clothing, etc. I had a larger store now, so I really had to train the staff to do things the way I wanted it done. And fortunately, I had that influence, and I was always there doing it. So it was not just a thing, a do as I say, it was a do as I do type of thing. And I developed a culture in the store. And the store got off to a great start. And about 4 or 5 months after I opened, a gentleman walked in and bought a suit for me. And I always found out things about the customer, and as I say, noted them. And I found out he was a creative chief at an agency called Young and Rubicam. And in fact, he was an American that had been sent up here to head up the creative department because they lost their Canadian creative head. And I said to him, I don't know a thing about advertising. It's kind of interesting. I think probably if we learned something about advertising, we might even, accelerate the growth of our business. And I saw an interested look in his eye, and I know he was impressed with what I did for him. And he came back a few days later and he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do some ads for you, but there are 2 conditions. One is, I'll present you with ads and you don't change a thing. If you change anything, the deal is off. The second is, I'd like 2 suits per ad. Now, he was originally a copywriter, and he got one of his art directors to work with him, a guy called Reed Bell. And together, I said, okay, let's do something. And I sat in his home for many evenings, several months, talking about men as consumers. And little did I know, but they were really searching for some angle on which to present the Harry Rosen advertising. And finally, at the end of it all, they presented me with a set of ads. And I liked them. I had some doubts, but I liked them. And I went to the Globe and Mail and I asked them for page 3, which was a guaranteed page. I did not want to pay the premium. But these ads, as they told me to tell them, were going to be as good for the Globe as they were for Harry Rosen. And with that, we started running the ads. We ran 6 of them consecutive Tuesdays, because that was a business paper, in the Globe and Mail only. And the ads immediately caught fire. The theme, Ask Harry, made its way into the lexicon of our of the business world. And this Ask Harry thing, I mean, we were out of the paper for months before we could get back in again for the following season. And people would come in the second season and say to me, well, I saw your ad last week, and that ad had run 6 months ago. So the recall factor was so strong, and the ads were so successful, we became known, our advertising became known as the Volkswagen advertising, the advertising business, you know. So at least the retail business, men's retail business. So that was the start of our business on Parliament Street. And the thing you alluded to, that Stan Burkhoff and Reed Bell, 2 great professionals in their industry, were working for us, a modest tailor, for 2 suits. And why were they doing that? I mean, they made money far in excess of what probably I earned, but they just got their creative kicks by having the liberty to do what they wanted for Harry Rosen, and I couldn't change a thing, and I didn't have to change a thing. They told me that, I mean, what I obviously became aware of was that they were, in the creative side of things, as agency personnel, they were frustrated by their clients. They felt their best advertising went in the garbage can. So they wanted the liberty to get their kicks out of doing creative work for someone, and they found it in me. For such a modest price, I got such professionalism. And that was the starting of Harry Rosen's brand development.
Classic example of bootstrapping.
If
Yeah.
you had to pick one thing, because I have to ask this question. If you had to pick one thing that was key to your success, what would you tell them? Is it the personal touch? Is it paying attention to the individual customer? What was it?
Well, I could answer that question in several ways, but I'd have to say the one thing that emerges to my mind as having developed us as a national and developed our business is the culture of service, that idea of understanding men as consumers. You know, men are ignorant when it comes to clothing, and they really don't like shopping. And if they find someone they trust, terrific things happen. They become very loyal. And what's more, they're your best advertising. A satisfied customer is your best advertising. He's always flashing your label and telling people how well he's looked after. And I use that as a means to develop a staff culture, and when we expanded into a multiple store operation, I managed to perpetuate that culture through our people. And today, it still exists as a very strong factor in determining customer loyalty. I hear it every Saturday when I'm on the floor of the store.
You still go back every Saturday?
I sure do. I love the interaction with customers. I love reading their heads. I love reading their attitudes, seeing how they dress, how they groom themselves, how they walk, their confidence or lack of confidence. And I fix all that.
We should send it back, including me.
So growing from the one store in Cabbagetown to Richmond Street, what were some of the difficulties as you expanded the Harry Rosen brand?
You mean beyond opening on Richmond Street? Beyond?
What were some of the challenges that you faced?
Well, sure. The first challenge was as a merchant with one store, and I had expanded that store in that location to 10,000 feet 3 times. I expanded it. I had a view that I was the buyer, the seller, motivated our sales staff, looked after our store design, merchandising, and all the rest of it. I just couldn't see operating a second store and not being present in both stores, and I couldn't be present. And I was losing some of my best staff because they couldn't see growth with our company, and they were learning, and they were going off and using what they learned in other pursuits. So I decided that I would finally take the bit by the teeth and open a store in Yorkdale. I bought the lease of Jack Cameron for $175,000. This great shopping center. He wasn't making money. Best thing he ever did was sell me the lease. He made money on that. And I opened a second store and sent several of our people up there with a clear understanding of what their mission was, to continue with that same culture that we had, and all the quality of the merchandise and the story of our merchandise and so on. And when we wound up opening the store, we wound up with lots of people coming in telling me they'd been reading our ads for ages in the Globe and Mail, and they'd never been in our store before. And that was what happened when we opened other stores. We found that our ads, our ads ran across the country, that there was a clientele or a group of people that were very aware of Harry Rosen. We were not the newcomer when we went to Edmonton or Vancouver. People had been reading our ads. So our ads preceded us, plus the fact that we'd built a reputation with a lot of people that moved out west with the economic boom there, or businessmen that came to Toronto to do business, etc. Through all these sources, we spread word about our presence, and our stores took off and were profitable immediately. So we were able to pursue the growth of our business to the 8 major markets of the country.
Harry, could you talk about your time in Tip Top and your relationship with Bob Humphrey and what you guys did?
Yeah, thank you. In 1968, I was asked by a couple of our customers who had bought the Tip Top business as a way of going public with their individual interests. They merged them, and I was asked to go down and assess the quality of fabrics that they had on hand, their inventory, and the product they were making. And I looked at what they had and the make of the product, and I found a lot was lacking. And so I advised them that, what they should be doing to dispose of this goods and in upgrading the quality of the product. And in these discussions, they became interested in buying our business and getting me to operate the Tip Top business. And it interested me because this is before I operated right across the country. It was a challenge to turn a business around that had lost money for 13 consecutive years. And apart from that, I loved the manufacturing side of the business, and I wanted to dabble in that and try and upgrade the product. And so I sold them our business, and I moved into operating the Tip Top chain and the Harry Rosen business. Now, they're very different businesses, and it was very difficult for me to put the time in the Harry Rosen business that it required. I hired a general manager, but he didn't work out, didn't bring any original thinking to the operation. So I did the best I could with that. But the Tip Top business, I was pleased to say, in its first year made a small profit after 13 years of losing money. And by the 3rd or 4th year, it was a considerable profitable contributor to the Dialex organization. And I was making extremely good money. And I really enjoyed rebuilding a reputation of an organization that had fallen out of step with the consumer and the trends in the world towards ready-to-wear clothing, etc. They were really knocking on the wrong doors. So I decided after 7 years doing that the Harry Rosen business wasn't getting the attention it needed, and I really loved the better end of the clothing business anyway. And so I made a deal to buy back 49% of the Harry Rosen business, which is what I did, and went back into running Harry Rosen. In Tip Top, we developed a team, and they were able to take over and carry on. It was a wonderful experience, a great education in business, I must say. And I had my cake and ate it,
Could you touch on Bob Humphrey?
Yes, Bob was the chief financial person in Tip Top. And when I needed someone to really watch over the Harry Rosen business and I wasn't succeeding, I asked Bob to go into the Harry Rosen business and to, even though he was a financial head, use his people skills to keep things taped together. And he did that so capably that when I came back in the business, I wanted to keep him, and we became virtually partners. He bought 10% of my interest and stayed with me, unfortunately, till he was 53, when he got pancreatic cancer and passed away. But he was a wonderful partner to me. I have my limitations. I know you're surprised, aren't you? But Bob had all the strengths that were necessary in complementing one another. And we made a great team, and I loved working with Bob. It was an unfortunate loss.
This is a lot for me to absorb, so I'm going to try to articulate myself properly. Seems like you've had tremendous growth in the initial starting of Harry Rosen. Talk to us about your family.
Sure, sure. We have 4 children. They're well educated. I attribute that to my wife. I wasn't there when they were born. I was in the store, you see. In fact, I vowed to have our 3rd child, she'd give birth in the window of our store, a 3rd child, you see.
I think she liked that.
No, she never was excited by it anyway. But we have 4 children, and they all got a nice education, and they all have nice families today. With Bob as my partner, I never really gave any thought to there being family succession in the business. Our eldest son, Larry, who runs the business today, had a law degree and an MBA and was practicing law successfully. And I had no idea that he would show an interest in running the business. And I guess it was in his 3rd or 4th year of practicing law that he decided he'd like to go into business and asked me about joining the company. And so I told him that I hadn't given any thought to that point, but I thought this must be good, you know. And I decided that he should go elsewhere and work in retail and get some experience and come in with some credentials rather than looking like he was the boss's son. And so I had him hook up with Tip Top at that point. And he was to be there 3 years, but he only stayed 2 years. I needed him. We had a vacancy in our buying area, and he came in. And he worked with me for 23 years until he took over the reins a few years ago and ran the company. But I'd never planned for succession within the family. If you ask me what did I envision, I really thought we were building this structure, this very sound business, pillars of strength in the quality of merchandise relationship with our vendors, quality of advertising and promotion, store design, merchandise presentation. All these things were our strengths. And I never imagined that that I wanted any of our children to be in our business. And it surprised me, as I said, that Larry wanted to come in the business. And Bob was there, and this was a wonderful relationship that we had. So the question is, what was I envisaging? Well, the company could have gone public, and we would have had shares, and we could have checked out or done whatever we wanted to do. But I never really abided by that either, so that I didn't really have a vision beyond building this entity that would stand the test of time and competition and be able to be successful ongoing without my presence or without Bob's presence. But my son's interest came as a surprise. And he came into the business, he learned the business, he proved himself, and when Bob passed away, I made him the president of the company, and then in time the chairman, and that's the extent my family has been involved. Our other children, there are 3 of them. One is a doctor in Calgary, very successful in his own right, teaches biomedical ethics as well as being a surgeon. Our second child, my daughter, was working in the business on the internet, just idling time because I